Hey, this is Matt Whitmer from Ready Precision. In this video, we are digging into the Support Mailbag and starting a new series where we grab anything that shows up in Support quite a bit that we think might need some reinforcement outside of you having to reach out to us to get an answer. So one thing that we see come up a lot these days, and to be honest, it's happened since almost the inception of Niagara, is people tend to have issues with using the email service and sending out emails. So in this video, we're going to dig into the email service just a little bit, look at what you need to set up, what you need to know, and make sure that if you run into an error, you know what you can do or what you should be looking for in order to correct that error. So let's jump into Niagara now and get started. All right, so we are in Niagara now, and I am logged into our building JACE, powers the whole building, and one of the first starting points, the first thing that you should be looking at and checking if you're going to use email is your TCP/IP configuration on your JACE. This is more important for a JACE than a supervisor because your supervisor likely already has this stuff done because Windows is handling it. But on the JACE side, you as the owner of the JACE, the one managing it, you have to set this portion up. So because email relies on a bunch of parts of our normal IP networking stack in order to make work properly, we need to make sure that we have our configuration set up properly in that TCP/IP configuration. Now, you may think, hey, I can connect to my JACE over the network. I must have everything set up properly already. Not so fast. You want to jump in here and look at the TCP/IP configuration because there are two specific pieces that we need set up and defined in here that you could totally be using your JACE and connecting to it on your LAN, your local network, and not have these two pieces defined. The first is our default gateway. Because we're relying on the internet and we're leaving our local area network in order to talk to our email servers, whether that be Gmail, which we will be using for this video, or an IT department, or a Office 365 email address, so anything else, we're going out to the internet and we're talking to a server in a data center somewhere else. It's not on our local area network. In order to get out of our local area network, our device needs to know where to go to get its footing to go to the right place on the wider network when it knows an IP address isn't on our LAN. That's what our default gateway is doing here. If a device is not in our subnet, which is defined by our subnet mask here, so basically in this case it's very, very simple. If a device or something we're trying to talk to is not at 192.168.1. something, our JACE knows it needs to go talk to the default gateway, and the gateway will handle the traffic from there. So we have to have that gateway set. In this case, it's 1.1, very easy. This is a very typical setup for a very simple network. But if you're on a larger network that's run by an IT department or something like that, they'll be able to get this information, and you very likely already have it defined. The next piece is that we're going to be talking to our email servers through domain names, not IP addresses. All domain names is an IP address that has basically an alias. So our domain name is an alias to an IP, and our JACE needs to know how to look up what the IP address is behind a domain name in order for us to talk to our email servers. And the way it does this is over a DNS server, and we have to have those DNS servers defined here in order to make that happen. Don't confuse this with the DNS domain that's listed here. You don't need that unless you have a very specific use case. Leave that blank. You want DNS servers, and by default, this will be totally blank. You'll have to hit the plus sign to get a field to punch it in. In this case, we're using the normal Google DNS servers, which is what you'll find most people are using. Again, unless you're in an IT department that has its own DNS servers, in which case you'll use those. They'll give them to you. But 8.8.8.8 and 8.8.4.4 is what we will typically see used out and about on a normal network where maybe it's not managed by a larger IT group. Very safe to use, and it's always good to have an alternate in there as well in case there's an issue with the primary. It will fall back automatically and use that secondary if it can't get to the primary. The other piece that's worth mentioning here is that we don't need any ports forward or anything like that in order to get out to our email servers and talk to them. We need outgoing traffic only, depending on the email server that you're talking to. That may be a handful of different ports, but 95% of the time, your outgoing traffic on the router that you're behind on your local area network is going to have the outbound traffic open so that you can talk to whatever you need to talk to, and you don't need to worry about any port forwards or anything like that. This goes for if you're using a Tazi box. You don't have to worry about port forwards or anything like that. The Tazi box won't interfere with sending out emails. We've had these deployed in a whole bunch of places with a whole bunch of JACEs behind them. Never any issues there. And with the way that the Tazi box works, there wouldn't be any issues. Same thing goes for just about any other router that you could think of. Even if they are totally locked down, 9 times out of 10, your outbound traffic is going to be okay. And then once you establish traffic outbound, it will let in inbound traffic automatically. And that's sort of just the way networking routers tend to work on the firewall side. Even when they're very securely set up. All right, so now I'm jumping into a slightly different station. This is just a station that's running on my local machine with a little bit of an alarm setup in order to make things happen and go. So I've got an alarm right now and an alarm recipient. This alarm right here, this Boolean writable, it has this email test class alarm class on it. So any alarms that come from here will automatically get fired out to an email. And that email is using our outgoing account. Our outgoing account in this case is a Gmail account. And we have that set up underneath our email service. Outgoing account will bring us right here. So you will note there is a bunch of setup. We've done videos specifically on the Gmail setup, which requires a couple little steps in order to make it work properly with Gmail. So we're not going to go into any depth on how you set up an outgoing account, but just a couple things to look for and what you need to know if you run into issues. In my case, this is working now, but I did have a failure before just for demonstration's sake, and it was a couldn't connect to host, and in this case, it was because I fat-fingered intentionally the host name there, and that's why it wasn't working. But this could not connect to host could indicate a whole bunch of things, and it typically means that you're not able to connect to the email server at all, which means you could have your gateway not set up. You could have your DNS not set up, like we talked about a second ago. You could have fat-fingered the host name, like I did here. You could be on the wrong port. You could have the wrong TLS set up. Basically means that we're not getting a response from the server, and the issue is on our end completely. Now, if you're using Gmail and you have everything set up properly here, but maybe your password is incorrect, or you're not using an app password, which is required by Gmail, you will get a completely different error message here. And it will be more explicit about what the issue is. And that will all depend on the email server that you're talking to and how they set up their errors. Now, you do have this drop-down menu here for debug, which will give you more in-depth error messages. I will say, most of the time, you won't even need to set this up. If you're running into a failure of any kind, you will see it here in your poll failure cause, and you'll also see it over here in your application director in more depth. So if I just scroll up a little bit here, you can see this is what our full debug is giving us. It's giving us a whole bunch of information that, frankly, you don't need to know and you don't really need to care about. All you will care about is when there's a failure. If I scroll up here, this severe email account could not poll, it couldn't connect to the server, and then it's saying here in a little bit more detail, this is an unknown host. In other words, nothing responded when I went to this URL. Maybe you should check that. And in this case, that's because the URL was incorrect. All right, so hopefully that was helpful and informative for you. Just a little bit of a more detailed look at troubleshooting if you have email issues in Niagara. This goes for, like I mentioned, supervisors or JACEs. 9 times out of 10, though, it probably will be on the JACE side because we, as the controls contractor, are responsible for setting up those TCP/IP configurations and our email account set up completely in a JACE. Whereas when we're using a supervisor, the Windows will handle a lot of that initial gateway and DNS setup depending on your use case. Now, obviously that doesn't cover every use case, but a lot of the time that will be the case. So hopefully that was helpful for you. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. If there's anything in particular with the email service that I didn't cover here for troubleshooting, you can leave those down in the comments below. And thanks as always for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.